Functional categorization. Perceptual categorization is a straightforward means of classifying sensory stimuli, but many categories are defined by more abstract criteria. For example, functional categorization groups items or events together according to a shared meaning or association. Forks, knives, and spoons belong in one category, whereas hammers, wrenches, and screwdrivers belong in another. Although functional categorization does not depend on perceptual properties, items within a functional category may share perceptual features. For example, a dangerous category could include large moving objects, but not small stationary ones. On the other hand, the rules for group inclusion in functional categories do not necessarily reflect physical similarities between exemplars. Items of cutlery are similar in size, shape, and color, but if the category were expanded to meals, it could include such diverse items as tables, cooking odors, and dinner bells. Because functional categorization often involves a common associate, in this case food, it is sometimes called associative categorization. Functional categorization is more cognitively demanding than perceptual categorization, so it is not surprising that perceptual categorization comes before functional categorization in human development. Determining when this ability emerges across phylogeny is more difficult because many functional categories, as defined by human experimenters, will not have the same meaning to other species. Despite the challenges, there is strong evidence that monkeys and other non-human primates have functional categories for food and animals, presumably due to the biological significance of each. Other animals may exhibit a consistent response to groups of stimuli, such as predators or prey, but the response is often elicited by a single sensory feature, e.g., a red belly on stickleback fish that elicits aggression, so it does not reflect true functional categorization, i.e., grouping distinct items together based on meaning or association. Given these difficulties, researchers have developed alternative ways to examine functional categorization in animals. One approach is to test functional equivalence, the understanding that different forms of an item represent the same thing. In other words, a picture of a dog, a description of a dog, and a real dog belong in the same category. Pigeons and non-human primates, such as monkeys, baboons, and chimpanzees, all exhibit picture-object equivalence for food versus non-food categories. Along with chimpanzees, California sea lions, and common bottlenose dolphins are capable of extending this functional equivalence to arbitrary symbols, which is the basis for written and spoken language in humans. Functional categorization may also be examined using a stimulus equivalence test, see Figure 9.6, in which stimuli within a group are associated with a common outcome, either the same response or the same reinforcer. For example, rats may be trained to press a lever whenever an exemplar from groups A or B are presented, and to nose poke whenever items from groups C or D are presented. In a subsequent reassignment phase, they learn a new response for items in groups A and C. The critical test occurs following reassignment. Do subjects now make the new response to items in groups B and D? If so, they have demonstrated stimulus equivalence in that changing the meaning of one category member alters the significance of all members. Experiments using this basic setup have revealed stimulus equivalence in humans and some animals, with most of these tests using pigeons as subjects. In any case, the acquisition of stimulus equivalence does not depend on language competence, supporting the idea that this ability need not be limited to humans. Figure 9.6. Experimental design for equivalence testing used to assess functional categorization in nonverbal subjects. During discrimination training, subjects associate two different stimuli, A and B or C and D, with one response or another, response 1 or response 2. During the reassignment phase, one of the original stimuli from each group, i.e. A and C, is associated with a new response, response 3, or response 4. During testing, the remaining two stimuli are presented, B and D, and subjects have the option of performing R3 or R4. Okay, that makes sense. So basically, they cannot perform response 1 or response 2 for B and D by the end. So they have to either choose the correct associative response or just the random incorrect associative response. Well, that makes more sense. Okay, so this is kind of like a flowchart with the 3 stages. First, discrimination training. So you have the stimulus, response, and outcome. So you have an A tone and B flashing light. Both lead to response 1 of a lever press, which leads to the outcome of a food pellet. In the other condition, you have C click and D solid light. Both lead to response 2, a nose poke, which leads to a food pellet. And then in the second phase, you have reassignment of the stimulus, response, and outcome. So an A tone gets associated with response 3, a wheel turn, which produces a food pellet. And in the other condition, a C click gets associated with reaction 4, a chain pull, which releases a food pellet. So in the third phase, the test phase, you have a stimulus and response. So when they experience B, a flashing light, will they choose response 3, a wheel turn, or response 4, a chain pull? Now, because B was grouped with A before, they should choose the wheel turn, response 3, the new response for the A stimulus, if they're treating them as equivalent categories. And in the other condition, D, the solid light, when they experience it, will they choose response 3, the wheel turn, or response 4, the chain pull? Now, they should choose response 4, the chain pull, because similarly, D has been associated with stimuli C, and stimuli C is reassociated with the chain pull, so stimulus D, as it's in the same category, should now be associated with the chain pull as well, if it's being treated as equivalents. In many ways, functional categories have more ecological relevance than perceptual categories because the groups are defined by meaningful relationships. It seems reasonable, therefore, that this cognitive ability would evolve in different animals, although the capacity may vary across species. The majority of research on functional categorization uses humans, other primates, or pigeons, most commonly pigeons. Comparative studies that expand this list would help to trace the evolution of this cognitive process. As an example, functional categorization in humans and some other primates extends to arbitrary symbols, but the paucity of data on this topic makes it difficult to establish whether other species possess the same ability. Relational categorization. Both perceptual and functional categorization are based on some property of the stimulus to be classified. In contrast, relational categorization groups items together that exhibit the same connection between them. The properties of relational categories, therefore, are relative rather than absolute. Determining whether a stimulus is bigger, louder, or brighter depends on what it is being compared to. Close to 100 years ago, Reve says, 1924, demonstrated that chicks understand these relationships in that they can learn to peck the smaller or larger visual stimulus, regardless of its shape. Other animals tested since that time, including some insects, have all passed this relational test. A more stringent measure of relational categorization is to test whether subjects can group stimuli based on a same, different association. The question is not whether individuals can detect similarities or differences between stimuli, but whether they can identify a relationship between stimuli, i.e. same or different, and then use this rule to classify new exemplars. For example, subjects may be presented with a red circle during a sample phase and then see an identical red circle and blue circle during the testing phase. If the categorization rule is same, the correct response is to select the red circle over the blue one. Animals ranging from insects to birds to primates quickly learn this discrimination, but the critical test occurs during the transfer phase, in which new stimuli are presented that vary on a different dimension. Subjects may see a triangle of any color during the sample phase and then a triangle plus a square, again of any color, during the testing phase. If they have learned to categorize stimuli based on relational rather than absolute properties, subjects will select the triangle over the square. That is, they know to select the stimulus that shares a critical feature with the sample, in this case shape, regardless of how the two differ on other features, such as size or color, so this must be if they're asking for the same. Because it relies on understanding rules for combining stimuli, relational categorization is often called rule-based learning. Monkeys, chimps, and some corvid species are able to match stimuli based on similarities or differences and, most importantly, to transfer these rules to new sets of items. Originally, it appeared that pigeons had difficulty learning relational categories, but later work contradicted this finding. That is, birds were able to transfer same different judgments from one visual element to another, e.g. texture to feature. Indeed, as long as the experiment is set up appropriately, see figure 9.7, honeybees are able to transfer a rule for selecting same or different stimuli from one sensory modality to another. Figure 9.7, design and results of an experiment testing relational categorization in honeybees. A. Bees were trained to fly along a path from one visual stimulus to another. Bees were rewarded if they flew to the same stimulus category at each choice point, target above the bar or target below the bar. B. Performance improved across trials, indicating that bees had learned the relational rule. When presented with a novel stimulus pair, transfer test, bees made more flights to the stimulus that matched their training category, i.e. target above the bar or target below the bar. The dotted line indicates chance performance. Okay, so there are 30 training trials where the bees are choosing to fly to the target above the bar or below the bar, and they're learning the relational rule that they're either supposed to fly to the target above the bar or below the bar, and then when they are presented with a novel stimulus pair for the transfer test, they are more likely to fly below the bar or above the bar, depending on which rule they have learned. Okay, so we have a scatter plot. On the y-axis is the percent of correct choices, and on the x-axis is blocks of 5 trials. Wow, okay, and then a line in the middle at 50% is showing what would occur by chance, and we are seeing that as the number of trials increases, the percentage of correct choices is increasing to over 80%. And when you look at the transfer test, yeah, it's about 80% of the time the bees will fly according to the rule that they have learned above the bar or below the bar. Not all researchers agree that these findings provide evidence for relational categorization across species. Many point out that humans, including young children, transfer knowledge of category relationships to new situations almost spontaneously. In contrast, most animals undergo hundreds or even thousands of training trials before they can perform correctly in transfer tests. Typically, non-human primates require less training than rats or pigeons. Similarly, humans and the other great apes can form same difference categories with exposure to only 2 stimuli, whereas baboons must be exposed to 3 or 4 different pairs, and pigeons to at least 16. Thus, even though many animals can make same different judgments during a transfer test, this may not reflect the formation of relational categories. One suggestion is that animals are relying on previously learned associations and generalization of perceptual properties to perform these tasks. Grouping stimuli together based on higher-order relationships or relationships among relationships also appears to be limited to great apes. These nested relationships are tested by presenting subjects with a pair of stimuli that are or are not matched on one dimension, e.g., if color is the dimension to be matched, a red circle and a red triangle would be the same. whereas a blue circle and a red circle would be different. During the test phase, subjects must categorize a new pair of stimuli by indicating whether the relationship between these is the same or different as the relationship between the pair presented in the sample phase. This ability to construct higher-order relationships and then apply the information to novel situations is a form of analogical reasoning often ascribed only to humans. There is little, if any, evidence that animals form relational categories of this nature, with the exception of chimpanzees. The experiment demonstrating this effect used an analogical reasoning paradigm adapted from developmental psychology, see Figure 9.8. Subjects watched an experimenter place food under one cup in a set, and then searched for a hidden food reward in another set of cups. If chimps were using an analogical strategy, they should look under the cup that bears the same relationship to the cups in their set as does the cup with the hidden food. For example, regardless of absolute sizes, if food was hidden under the experimenter's smallest cup, chimps should look under the smallest cup in their own set. Rather than using information about relative size, however, 2 of the 3 chimps in the experiment relied on relative position to search for the food. The experimenters concluded that, although they had not performed as expected, chimps had developed their own analogical reasoning strategy. The same ability emerges in humans between 3 and 4 years of age, but whether it exists in monkeys is still debated. Thus, it is not clear whether the cognitive process of forming higher-order relational categories is restricted to the family of great apes or the broader order of primates, nor do we know whether corvids, who display many of the same cognitive traits as great apes, possess this ability. Figure 9.8. Schematic presentation of an experiment testing analogical reasoning in chimpanzees. A. An experimenter hides food under one cup on the upper level, e.g., medium-sized. To receive the reward, the chimpanzee must point toward a cup on the lower level that bears the same relationship to the cups on this level. B. Different task conditions in the analogical reasoning task. Numbers represent the absolute size of each cup. The top row in each phase represents the experimenter's set of cups. The bottom row represents the subject's choice set. Arrows connecting cups indicate correct matches. Distractor trials included a cup in the subject's level that matched the absolute size of the cup where the food was hidden in the experimenter's level. The dissimilar transfer trial used stimuli with different shapes in the experimenter and subject levels. Okay, so you have a table where the monkey has one level that's lower than the experimenter, and then the experimenter has another level, and they're both sitting on either side of the table. So there's diagrams of the different scenarios that they went through, like B, matching to sample, physical match. So if the experimenter's cup was size 2, the monkey should choose size 2 instead of size 5 cup. And if the experimenter has 2 cups, one size 3 and one size 6, the monkey should choose the cup size 6 on his side. Relational match, 2 and 3 item. Okay, so the experimenter has a smaller cup and a larger cup, and so does the monkey, so the monkey should choose the smaller cup. And in the second one, there's a small, medium, and large cup, and the experimenter chooses the large cup, so the monkey should also choose the largest cup on his side relative to the other cups. Relational match with distractor, 2 and 3 item. Okay, so now the experimenter has a smaller and a larger cup, and so does the monkey, but the smaller cup on his side is the size of the larger cup on the experimenter side, so the monkey still has to choose the relationally larger cup even though it's not an exact match like the cup size 4 would be. And then it's the same with 3 items, so there's a small, medium, and large. And the monkey also has a small, medium, and large. The experimenter chooses the medium, and then the monkey has to choose the medium on his side, whereas the experimenter's medium of 3 is the same as the monkey's small of 3. Relational match with distractor, all novel stimuli transfer. Now we have square cups. The experimenter has a small, medium, and large cup. So does the monkey. So the experimenter chooses the largest square cup, and so the monkey needs to do that too. Even though there's also a distractor this time where the largest cup on the experimenter side is equivalent to the medium cup on the monkey side, but he still needs to choose the largest, so he chooses the 6 size. Relational match with distractor, dissimilar transfer. So now you have 3 cups on the experimenter size, which are circular, and then 3 cups on the monkey size, which are square, and then you have a small, medium, and large. So the experimenter chooses the smallest cup on his side, so the monkey must choose the smallest cup on their side. Again, though, the smallest cup on the experimenter side is the same size as the medium cup on the monkey side. And now, of course, they're different shapes as well, so the monkey has to transfer all of that knowledge and choose the smallest cup. I mean, if they can do that, that is really impressive. I don't even know if I would do that.